All right, y'all. For all my people, this is D Moss. This is not civil disruption. This is the last page with D Moss. And today, it's one of those special things. I only do the last page when I have a really special guest that, I just want to make sure I shine some extra light on. Y'all know what I mean. So today we are joined by Amy McCoy. She's a candidate for Douglas County Commission District 4 for the Board of
Yes,
Commissioners.
sir.
Amy brings more than 2 decades of experience in real estate, housing, community development, public policy. She's a former president of the West Georgia Board of Realtors. She's been actively involved in fair housing, economic development, community issues all across Douglas County down here in Georgia. Her candidacy comes at an important moment for the county, particularly as Douglas County faces rapid growth, infrastructural challenges, and the never ending continued debate over data centers and responsible development. She is a write in candidate for all my Georgia people. She is a write in candidate for District 4. So, Amy is joining us today to talk about her background, her vision for Douglas County, and why she believes she is definitely the right person to represent the district. With that being said, thank you for joining me, Amy. I appreciate you taking time out of your ever so busy schedule.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's important that when someone says, "Hey, I want to have a conversation with you," to actually stop, take the time, listen to find out what those needs are, and then so that you know how to be able to respond and move within in the community. So, I am very, very appreciative of this opportunity. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. So, Amy, for listeners who may be learning about you for the very first time, it's a huge county. Who are you? What led you to run for Douglas County Commissioner in District 4? What led you to run as a writer?
Well, I appreciate that question. I mean, you gave my laundry list of backgrounds, so there's nothing I can hide from that. I've always been pretty much an open book, just because I understand the way that I'm built. I'm built for service. I've been in Douglas County for over 23 years in working within the real estate sector, but within that, I developed my passion with helping in public policy, because I understand how real estate becomes the intersection of how funding comes through a county, but then how the resources are allocated through a county. And so, I take the experience that I have and work to put it forward for our community. I've owned businesses all around Douglas County. I have lived throughout Douglas County. But what I have observed is that the leadership in District 4 was going in a drift and has not had very much of a vision or a plan. And with it being the largest landmass of the county, there needs to be some real leadership there. And because it impacts a huge, huge space across this county. But more importantly, I needed to be an effective role for the board, because Douglas County in its entirety really needs the level of support through leadership. And so I think what I can bring to the table will help move Douglas County forward.
Okay. So, I often hear you describe yourself as an independent and informed voice. What does independence look like in practice, especially with the potential of you serving on the Board of Commissioners?
Yeah. And again, great question. I've always voted Democrat, but however, what the reason I'm running as a write-in candidate is because there's already a Democrat nominee, right?
Right.
And the timing that I chose to place my candidacy in on the record fell after the primary. Um, at the time, I had no plan to run. I believed in the level of service that I've been committing to with policy influencing. However, what I recognize is that there are just some people in the way they play politics, just as it is ignoring what the community actually needs. And seeing the voting patterns of both candidates, both Republican and Democrat, are not really looking at what the needs of the community is. They're looking at their own personal agenda. And with that observation, I felt compelled to be able to put my name forward. Again, being someone who services in this community, who has a invested interest into seeing Douglas County succeed, I want to
Right.
make sure that it's held at the highest priority.
Okay. Let's talk about it. I just want to dip into your experience and you being
Yeah.
prepared for this seat. And I'm going to share the first time I experienced Amy McCoy might have been at a board meeting at one of the BOC meetings, and you were up speaking a couple of times. And I'm asking myself, who is she? Is she an elected official somewhere? You seem to have had more information than a lot of the people who run for office, who were office holders at the time. No disrespect to any of them, but I was like, well, who is she? Then I had the pleasure of interacting with you the first time when Commissioner Mitchell held his town hall last December.
Mhm.
So I was just blown away by you. So I just had to throw that out there so people know if I seem a tad bit biased, it's because of how impressed I was. It has nothing to do with the other candidate. It's just she's phenomenal. So you bring more than 23 years of real estate experience along with service and housing, public policy, and community advocacy. We talked about that.
Mhm.
How has that prepared you to make decisions about growth, development, taxation, and housing in Douglas County?
So the level of service that I've given has not just been on a local level because of my intersections that I have with things that impact on a state level, but also on a national level. I've even consulted internationally to help with in tourism and things like that. I grew up overseas. My parents were military, so that having that experience in being in other cultures or previous war torn countries to be able to uh, experience what that looks like, what discord could look like in other countries, having to learn different languages or at least just how to get by. It kind of gave me a little bit of an experience of what to expect here in South Georgia, right? Being that I was born in South Georgia, but being west of Atlanta is a breed of its own. I love
Right.
Douglas County. I grew up coming back from Germany. We resided in Clayton County. And then I started working at Metro State Prison. So I saw what it looks like when you don't have investments in a community and then what that end result tends to look like. Being a drill sergeant at a maximum security prison, nobody's trying to really rehabilitate when they got another 10 years on their plate, and that's where how can you properly get people into a different mindset without having to abandon them? And what I learned is that the root issue comes in the intersections of housing, because housing impacts education, it impacts the food that comes into a community, it impacts the health that comes into the community, the infrastructure, all those different things. Having the opportunity to learn from Congressman Johnny Isaacson, but then also having Congressman John Lewis be my neighbor for 8 years, having that type of connection helped hone in what my journey actually needed to look like. At the same time of completing Leadership Douglas here in Douglas County, I had already taken my DEI certifications through eCornell. And then I was also on a national leadership academy for the National Association of Realtors, which is a very um, selective group. It took me 3 times to finally get into the class. Out of over 100 years, only 300 people have actually graduated from this. Well, I guess now since my class, there's been another 40 people, I guess, since then. But just to kind of use that example, I was able to match everything together from what happens locally to what happens on a national level, and how we can make the biggest impact by sometimes you have to reach across lines. Because of organizations that I'm a part of as a state leader for the United States Global Leadership Coalition, that helps me think in the purview of what small business has to go through and how that can help on an international scale. So that way, is as much as it is how we circulate our dollars, because that's a huge pillar for me with wanting to be a commissioner here in Douglas County. I also want to make sure that we're able to scale those businesses so that people can compete on an international level or a state level, and how we build their business up to making sure that that's accessible for them. So yeah, just my experiences. I thank God for just having a great memory and being able to recall things when the moment is needed. Because of my experiences, I feel like I I can hear when someone's just feeding me a load of shit, and sorry for the language, but that's just, I feel like I can weed through a lot of that in the moment.
Okay. Fair. I enjoy. I like that. All right. So let me move on to the next question.
Yeah.
You advocated at the local, state, national, international level.
Mhm.
Fair housing, HOA reform, veterans housing protections, responsible development. How would you turn that advocacy experience into measurable results for District 4, and how would you gauge that?
Well, so even before deciding to take this journey, I recognize that we are in a housing crisis. Obviously, I am in housing. But when I say housing crisis, it's not just saying, oh, we have a lot of homeless population, but it is about how people are aging in place. What is the mechanisms being put in place to displace people? Sometimes it could be the taxes. Sometimes it could be the levels of insurance. Yes, we're investing a lot in public safety, but then why are we investing in public safety? Is it because we've restricted the access to mental health? But when people are calling 911, what does that do? The insurance companies are looking at, well, okay, now I can go up on rates. But so are we truly servicing our community, or are we just playing politics when it's really a health issue? And so, or is it because people are hungry that now our crime has picked up because they're trying to find a way to make money for food? You know what I mean? It's actually having that fair housing background and understand, because some people will think it's just housing, but again, it's all the intersections that come with it.
Right.
It's because of those property taxes is how we're funding some of these resources. The problem of that is it cannot be solely on the burden of homeowners, right? And we cannot just focus on building transient style housing. Apartments can be a solution, but it can't be the only solution,
Right.
because they have a level of margin that they still have to make in order for it to be a vested interest in the community. And if government thinks that, hey, this is our way of building up our tax digest, well, yeah, that's one way. But if you keep increasing those taxes, that's going to keep increasing the rent on the tenants. And all that does is just chasing the dollar is not the real solution.
Becomes a cycle. Got you.
Does become a cycle. And so I really want to capture, and so I go back to my point of, before deciding to take this role, I did write for a proposal for the office of chief housing officer, because there needs to be someone that's there to actually forecast where we will see ourselves over the next 1 to 3 years, or to 5 years, or 10 years if we don't get ahead of this now. And so, because it's not just what happens locally, the state dollars impact us, depends on what federal dollars come down and impact us. We've been watching several of these calls, the commissioner meetings, and seeing how funding is being taken away from certain organizations, which I feel is unfortunate. Um, you know, because of the services that those organizations provide and what people don't understand. And I'll just use this as a quick example.
Okay.
Um, the CSB, I believe they used to get $1.2 million. And then all of a sudden, when you had an interim chair came in and took $1 million of funding away from them. And so now you have to survive off peanuts, so to speak, on top of the federal funds that were just restricted because of an administration change. But at the end of the day, while some people are still playing politics, there's still an end person that needs those services. And I think people are forgetting that. And I don't want to just say it's ego trips. It's really coming down to prioritizing the needs of our community.
Right.
And if we start there first, then we can really build out a plan for success. We cannot annex everything into different cities just to finally get, things built up. Because again, now you're imposing additional taxes on people that may not even be necessary. And so it's really about being responsible within our planning. And so I feel like I have that experience in knowing the needs of people, in order to make rational questions that are clear language, not just for the people, but actually the commissioners, the colleagues that I'll be sitting next to when we make these decisions.
Okay. Um, it's interesting. We can intellectualize the plight of folks who are like living in poverty or two paychecks away from poverty. It's another to understand the service deliverables
Yeah.
and modify your expectations accordingly in terms of what you're expecting some of these agencies and organizations that are out there doing the work. I I couldn't agree with you more. And I have other questions, but I'm gonna sidebar for a quick second.
Okay.
Let's talk about that exhibit
Okay.
because it's like I call myself a student of history. I enjoy history. I particularly enjoy Black history. I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah.
but walking through that exhibit, I learned some things
Good.
that I was never taught, not in high school, college, nothing. And it's just interesting that you're looking to become an elected official, but at the same time, you're so ingrained and so embedded within the community itself and creating not just leading organizations and leading the charges in terms of advocacy, but creating teachable moments and learning opportunities for people in unorthodox learning environments. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Can we talk
Absolutely.
about that? Because I was, again, blown away. Please.
Yes, thank you. And just for your listeners that may not know, I curated the Keys to Equity Fair Housing exhibit. I recognize that, we were going in a trajectory of people that were saying, hey, my vote's not going to count. And, why do I even need to pay attention? No, I don't watch the news. No, I don't even know what's going on. And then, in talking with several students, because I'm back in school myself, working to get my master's in public administration. And I'm talking to students, they were like, "Well, I have no idea who that is." And I'm like, you're in college now. How do you don't know these things, right?" And it opened my eyes because of the books that I've previously written. And people were like, "Okay, Amy, is this for academia or is this for any and everyday people?" And so creating the exhibit, I wanted to break it down all the way to where it is plain language. You can see a visual, you can read a small block, and here's a phrase at the end of this. So that way people learn in different ways. And I really wanted that exhibit to be very immersive, but with funding and working off the limitations that I had, I'm so glad to hear the feedback that you gave because then it still sounded like it was a success. And that's what I wanted, right?
Absolutely.
For people
Absolutely.
to learn what history is. And the Keys to Equity, which anyone can review it, thekeystoequity.com. It's still live online. It made it to its second location. We are looking for where it will go next. And I actually completed the book, which has already been released back in June, The Keys to Equity book that has now come out. It is um, a instructable book, so that way, if you wanted to have it part of a book club or teach it in school or however, anybody can do that. That's The Keys to Equity. And so it teaches people on a journey all the way starting from 1832, from when, we started extracting land from indigenous people to where then it's being given 160 acres were being given to people that immigrated into this country. As long as you were a certain hue, you got land. And then to where, we finally have the abolishment of slavery. And so you have 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, but all these things are actually happening right now where current policy is trying to remove a lot of uh, these amendments that are in grind, like into our Constitution. And so taking it all the way to where we are here in 2026 and people can actually see what laws are actually being gutted. And since having the exhibit, we've just taken some provisions out of the Voting Rights Act law. And so, but what people didn't know is that even for women's rights, yes, we saw it on reproductive, but it was getting ready to roll back how from our voting, opportunities and, just different laws and the way they were written. Um, just how just taking little changes can actually remove the whole meaning and of those laws. And so hearing that feedback from you really means a lot. And I just want to say, as an experience, watching some of the students that came through, there was one class that came through, um, and some of the parents, they had homeschools, and so there's a section that's all about who paid the real price when it came to children stepping up and giving their voice, in order that really changed the course of history. And we always will remember Ruby Bridges, but then
Yep.
the Little Rock Nine.
Yep.
But a gentleman that I've had the pleasure of meeting, James Meredith, who really changed, especially access into higher learning, as a veteran, in using his GI Bill to go back to school and integrating. I mean, what people don't know is that you literally had martial law. You had the federal government, the U.S. Marshals that were there to help usher him in. But then President Kennedy had to call in the United States Army because you had a mob of KKK, you had the National Guard, all there on one side supporting the governor, trying to block one man's access into higher learning. My first college I went to was just 20 minutes down the road at Russ College in Holly Springs, Mississippi, still in there today in operation, one of the original 10 HBCUs. And so when I see that economic development tends to pass them over and go to Ole Miss, and it's like,
Absolutely.
you start to see history. And so you see Ida B. Wells right here on my wall. She's from Holly Springs, Mississippi. And that's it's an icon. And so her level of journalism always speaks and resonates with me. And so it's that spirit that I operate in, to making sure that the community always knows what's going on. And
Right.
if you don't know, you have to step aside and start doing your research, because people will just come out here and say anything and everything. And sometimes, because of their hue, people think they're right.
Hmm.
And we need to be able to move past that and look at facts. I can't change the my appearance. I mean, yeah, I can put a wig on, or put some lashes on, or put some nail. I could do all those kind of things. But what I'm not going to change is what my heart and my soul is. And that's making sure that I'm defending the rights for myself, but also
Hmm.
my community. That was a long answer. I'm so sorry.
No, no, it was a long but necessary answer. I think as we talk about standards and expectations of the people that we vote for,
Mhm.
um, you're a marker, you're a benchmark in terms of where we need to be and what type of. You're right. A lot of people, they live for the sound bites. It sounds good and they're presenting great, but it's like, what are you really saying? And then let me see your body of work to see if it's consistent with those sound bites. You know,
The
that's
facts.
I'm gonna leave it with that. So I appreciate that explanation. I think people really need it. What is the website for that exhibit?
Yeah, thekeys-to-equity.com. Thekeys-to-equity.com. And it had a great presentation when it left from Douglas County and went to Cobb County. It was at the Riverside Epicenter, and they put a whole additional education set up behind it. We had some home buying seminars. We actually had some small business incubator setups. I mean, it was really great to have some epic talks. And so, I'm looking forward to making sure that it gets showcased in other locations.
Okay. And that's THEKEYS 2equity.com, correct?
Write out TO for thekeys to
TO
equity.com.
EQ. Okay. So make sure I got it right on there. If
Yeah.
folks can see it over to YouTube, it's right over to YouTube. The last those words, it's right there. Go check it out. I know I'll be checking it out a couple of times. Do that. Okay, let me
Yeah.
get back on track with my questions. But I had to ask that question. I think it's important for people to know.
Yes.
Um, so it's hard to move forward if you have no idea what took place before you got there. Here we go.
Absolutely. Facts matter, and
Hmm.
when you have a past as complicated as the United States of America is, and as complicated as Georgia is, and as complicated as Douglas County is, okay? Even all the way here in 2026 with all its complexity, you have to acknowledge the past. if you ever are going to be able to seek to find a way for a future, for there to be a future.
Right.
And what we have learned is you have had leaders that are just mm, lackadaisical and just, not proactive in any bit. They're very reactive. And again, it always depends on if your friend, if they're going to do something. And so it comes down to how do we make sure that everyone has an opportunity to thrive in the same community that their neighbor is in. It doesn't have to just be boundary lines. At the end of the day, the decisions that I would make for District 4 will impact Douglas County in its entirety. But I will fight very hard for District 4 to make sure it's getting the proper funding it needs for its infrastructure repairs because it's needed out there too.
Okay. Unlike candidates who, and you might have already answered this, unlike candidates who become visible only during election seasons,
Mhm.
you've already been attending meetings, examining public records, walking neighborhoods, raising community concerns. What has that work taught you about the needs of District 4? And I know you've already, in everything else you said, it's already been, addressed. But just when I go back and write this up and publish the article in this interview, I want to make sure that I catch everything. Is that okay?
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm going to use an example that I had from this past weekend. Um, and I mean, at 95-degree weather, door knocking is not easy in Georgia, okay? Especially in District 4. We tend to focus on the very dense neighborhoods, but I didn't want to do that. I also wanted to make sure that I'm looking those that are more in, the Dog River Basin area, to making sure that even though those homes are more spread out, and I got my fair share of how spread out they were as I'm walking the neighborhood. I got my steps in that day. Let me just
I
say
bet you
that.
do.
But, having the conversations for everyone that actually opened the door and those that offered water, very thankful for that because it was hot. But I would ask those that actually engaged with me, what is it you want out of Douglas County? And for people that answered that question alone, had worked for either some type of municipality, some of them worked in Atlanta, some worked within Douglas County. And one thing that they say is nobody asked them that question.
Mm,
No one ever asks what their expectations truly are.
right.
Sometimes we think, oh, well, because my tax dollars are already incorporated in with my mortgage, I just know I'm going to have to make that payment.
Right.
But what I heard is, I just don't want any more data centers. I just want this road, paved. I just want, the trees not to be falling on the road. Who's on first base, so to speak, and so at the end of the day, what I took away from it is that no one's really truly asked them what their what they want from the county, or even what that expectation was. So I learned a lot from that, because yes, I have vision. Yes, I know how to properly plan things, right? But all that goes to nothing if I'm not working at the will of what the people are asking for. And we got to start there. What is it that they want, in order to make sure that we're properly planning in accordance to, yes, we want the tax digest to grow, but we want to make sure that we have buy-in from the community. That's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So while you're out door knocking,
Mhm.
and for folks who are not from Douglas County, please know that there are a lot of dirt roads,
Mhm.
unpaved roads, and to get to some of these houses, yeah, you got to do some traveling, and you really have to be committed to it. So while you're out there and you're talking with our neighbors, what
Mhm.
were some of the concerns that they raised?
I
And
just
yeah,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, it was just even in that, just, how the road is actually going to be. We have T-Splosh getting ready to come up on the November ballot. Many of them didn't understand what that truly was. And after talking with the transportation director, as he has told me that District 4 happens to be where they get the most complaints in the needs for the roads being paved, but then they also get the biggest pushback. And I think the level of miscommunication has come because here we have our Connect Douglas, which does get funds from that. But in it not coming through District 4, many of them feel like they didn't get their fair share of what those dollars go to. And so it's understanding and kind of dispelling some of those myths with that. Now, I don't work in transportation, right? But what I can say is here's what I know, and here is who you can reach out to. There was a gentleman that had posted about pine beetles. Now, I want to say I'm not God. I can't stop pine beetles, but what I could do, and like I did, is send emails out to different departments in order to make sure that it came up on someone's radar that hey, we have limbs falling down here, or hey, we've got some experiences of dead trees. What can we do? Within one department responded like in 7 minutes. The next department responded within 10 minutes, and within an hour, the city of Douglasville had responded, right? Because I tagged everyone in, but everybody was like, hey, let me go find this out. Let me go investigate. By 3 days later, I got a report saying, hey, we notified that there was this one dead tree. We did take that one out. We saw a couple of dead limbs. We went on ahead and chopped those down. If you have any specific addresses, we're happy to go check those out as well. Sometimes that's all it is. People just want to know that, hey, if they mention something, who is it going to go to? Now, will it always fall under my jurisdiction once I become commissioner? Maybe not. But if I know whose jurisdiction it does follow off, what is it for me to just say, let me put a phone call in or a text message in or an email in, right? Or, hey, here is the steps that you can do so that next time this issue pops up, you'll already know how to handle it. But if you do need anything, you can always reach out to me. So I've been working in this community for so long. It's nothing for me to continue working on. It's still going to be same business as usual at the end of the day. All I ask is that when residents go to those voting polls, they write in Amy McCoy, be intentional about this vote. So that way you have somebody that's sitting in that seat that in that moment, when those decisions are being made, that's actually going to be there to work in their best interests. That's all I ask. I lost you there.
No, because I'm in father mode as well as everything else. So my kids are having the ball. Excuse that. Okay, so I have a couple more questions,
Yes.
but I'm gonna park them for a minute and let's go to the writing process, and then I'll come
Okay.
back to the questions. I want to make sure people are aware of what the writing process encompasses. Can you talk
Yes.
about the writing process?
Yes. So the write-in process, uh, let me say, it's not easy to take this journey. Anybody that decides that they want to ever go through the process of being a write-in candidate, you need to make sure you've gotten with the elections department and find out the rules and policies based on that area. Okay. Every county does things different, apparently. The state of Georgia comes out with its rules. So, whatever that elections director says, this is your process, that's your process. Okay. So, when you as a voter go to the voting polls, if you choose to get an absentee ballot, now is the time you can request your absentee ballot. If you don't want to wait in lines, or if you know you're going to be out of town, you can request your absentee ballot now. And your absentee ballot will have on there the race for District 4 County Commissioner. That's the race I'm running for. So you'll locate that race and you'll see that there's two candidates already on the ballot, one Republican, one Democrat. I am going to be the write-in candidate. So you're going to see that line. You're going to see that oval that says write-in. You're going to circle in that full oval, and then you're going to write in Amy McCoy. That's AMYMCCOY. Okay. Now, if you, and once you have that done, now you could do all the other races, but in that race specifically, do not make any other markings other than write in Amy McCoy. Okay. Complete your ballot, get it turned in. Verify that everything is on there correctly, and then get that turned in. Now, if you go to the voting polls, you should see my name. My name is supposed to be listed there in the facility that shows that there is a write-in candidate. It should properly document how to spell my name. Luckily, there's no one else that's on the ballot that has the last name McCoy. Okay. Yes, there's different spellings of McCoy, but mine is very traditional MCCOY. It does not matter if it's two capital C's, as long as it is and legible that it means McCoy, then it should be casted and counted. But when you're in the voting polls, you'll need to actually mark the write-in space that's on the race for District 4. Once you do that, check that box, you write in AMY MCCOY, Amy McCoy. Then you verify it. Make sure that once you complete the rest of your ballot and you print it, make sure it actually says my name there in the District 4 race for county commissioner. If it's not there, you need to report it immediately because there may be something wrong with that tablet itself. Okay. But you'll need to make sure that once it prints, that once you've cast your vote, before you go and give it, put after it prints, once you go turn it in, that it's correct the way that you want your vote to be casted. And once it's done, then that's it. Hopefully it works out in my favor.
Absolutely. All right, now we'll get back to our regularly scheduled questions, and I'll try and keep it brief. I don't want to keep you all night. You have said that growth should pay for growth.
Yes.
What does that mean, and how would you ensure that existing residents are not left paying for the infrastructure required by new development?
I love this question because I actually served on a work group to advising on impact fees,
Mm-hmm.
right? For the longest time, Douglas County, even in Douglasville and even city of Villa Rica, because District 4 does have two cities that sit within the county. Most people don't recognize that because, again, it is the largest landmass, right? So you have two municipals, and then you have Winston, which is still unincorporated,
Mm-hmm.
but it all sits within the county. The challenge with not charging for impact fees is because then you have growth coming in, but that burden then holds on to the current taxpayers, right? It's one of the reasons why we have T-SPLOS, because that's another way for other businesses or other people that come into our county and spend money to chip in on infrastructure that's needed, right? Well, that's the same way when it comes to impact fees. If we have a new build apartment community, right? Or a hotel, or even because we've had an influx of data centers come through. But if we have these buildings coming through, then what's going to happen is they're going to have to pay this additional fee. And that fee is what's going to go be allocated to maybe a new road that comes through, or it's going to funnel to our parks and recreations, our EMS. And what we've learned over the past couple of years by not charging, we've missed out on millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. If we went with our full amount, I think it was 6,500. If we had been charging that, we would have brought in at least $34 million on to helping bring in that type of infrastructure. Right now, we are proposing $3,500, and it be split. Now, it can't be split in terms of only certain people pay and certain people don't. We looked at it from how much, what commercial is going to actually allocate its funds to versus what the homeowners or the small businesses are going to actually allocate its funds to, right?
Yep.
Because industrial is probably not going to use our parks, but they are going to be using our roads, right? So
Yep.
now the bulk of that may go towards our roads, but then our residential can actually impact most of that going to our EMS and our parks and things of that sort, where that's needed, because those are services that they're going to be using. I think it's important that really when you bring in businesses, you create cohesion of everybody's providing their fair share. Otherwise, you're going to have some level of resentment for that business coming in, and yet they're damaging roads or whatever that case may be, and then that burden falls back on homeowners. So I
Right.
think that's why I focus on growth, funding growth.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that response. And I'm going to do my questions. Give me a second. Let's see. What's my next one? There's quite a few. We're going to go to District 4 includes communities with very different needs.
Mhm.
How would you ensure that rural residents, established neighborhoods, homeowners, businesses, and underserved areas all receive the same fair representation?
So for me, I actually plan on creating like you know, in more urban areas, you have a lot more of your block captains, right? I used to serve
Yep.
on an HOA board, so you kind of know how to do things. But in that community, I'm going to be looking for my people that actually want to participate in how things run that can help in all the different sectors. Because yes, we've had some level of gerrymandering. We do have some heavily dense areas what are located closer to the mall. And yes, we have some very rural areas, which is along the southern border that approaches Fulton and Carroll County. But what I do know is a lot of economic development is about to come that way near Fox Hall. So hence, why I had my conversation with the transportation director, because it's how are we making sure that corridors over there are not being bottlenecked when you do have business starting. And so that's
Right.
where proactive planning starts, where you
Absolutely.
have to be thinking ahead, not just in the moment, but 3 to 5 years in advance. Because if we're not properly preparing for it, how do we know to ask for funding? Right. So, on top of what's going to be happening on the north side, because District 4 goes all the way up to Paulding County, right? And so
Right.
it takes up 40% of this of the entire Douglas County. And so with all those pockets, it's important to making sure that you have people that join you on this journey to making sure it's properly equitable. I want there to be more connectivities. I understand we have trailway plans, but I also think that there needs to be more interconnectivity within District 4 itself. And so I have some plans that I plan to do that and then grow along those trailways where it's not, we're focused only on Villa Rica and then we've missed out what could be closer to Fox Hall. How do we connect those corridors? What's happening in Fairplay? How do we make sure that Winston doesn't get forgotten? You know?
I
So
do.
there's multiple ways of being able to connect it, and it doesn't always have to be Douglas Connect with a transportation van. It could be bike opportunities. It
Right.
could be it could be a number of different things.
Okay. Let's see. You consistently raise questions about abatements, public
Mhm.
spending, zoning decisions, impact studies, and the use of taxpayer dollars. What changes would you pursue to make county government more transparent and accountable?
Definitely going to require more of those impact studies ahead of time.
Okay.
It's important to making sure that, again, how do we make sure that things are more equitable? That's how you get more buy-in from your community if they truly understand what's at stake. I get it. Most people say, well, you don't want to let them know too much because then the land prices are going to go high. They're going high regardless,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what's happening. That's just economics and what it is. Okay. But if we're not properly bringing people to the table, not all the time you have to buy someone out. You can lease land, you can create different partnerships, you can create um uh there's a lot of different mechanisms that are out there, a lot of federal grants that are out there in order to get those type of studies completed. If you bring people to the table, I've been a volunteer a lot in my life, right? As someone who consults in many different capacities, I also have given myself through volunteerism to making sure that, hey, there is a voice that is looking out for the average person, right? Some of that has to be limited because I still got to keep a roof over my head. But
Right.
even with that comes with a level of responsibility. And so you want to make sure that you're inviting more people to the table, not just yes men and women, but those that can ask the questions, to making sure that we're giving all point of views and perspectives at that table when those conversations are being had. Not every challenge or change I say it a lot, has to be a revolution. Sometimes it's just asking a simple question. What is it you want?
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm gonna combine two questions. Some people view asking difficult questions as being confrontational.
Mhm.
How do you distinguish between productive accountability from political conflict? The second part of the question is, how would you approach disagreements with fellow commissioners while still moving important initiatives and conversations forward?
So everyone has an ego. I'm a Gemini. I love that my ego being stroked every now and then, but but at the end of the day, it really does come down to what the mission is. Again, my parents were military. I've now working through my master's, understanding that we're not always going to get it right, and you do have to have a thick skin with this. But it's also making sure we're removing the personalities when it really comes down to how public dollars really are spent. At the end of the day, if you focus on what the mission is, and the mission is the people, some of this stuff can be resolved a lot easier. I love working around people, but I put myself in certain rooms where I have to have uncomfortable conversations, right? Yes, I may vote Democrat in a lot of things I do, but I also work alongside a lot of Republicans. Okay. And I love sometimes coming out and they're like, man, I like working with Amy. You know, yeah, because you find common ground. When you can find that common ground, it makes conversations a lot easier. That's how we were able to move SB 406 through for homeowner property rights bill. Is how now we've been able to get the 21st Century Road to Housing bill on a federal level passed. You have to find common ground. We're all going through things, right? We're all going through things. And sometimes you have to put those party affiliations to the side and say, what is the actual mission? How can we actually achieve it and put our personalities aside? Not everything has to be a disagreement.
I agree with that 100%. I mean, growing up, I used to laugh when people talk about the distinctions between black Republicans and black Democrats. I'm like, listen, we are progressive, liberal, conservative, all that, depending on the issue, depending on your value sets, depending on, as you say, the mission. What is it we're trying to accomplish? Um, so it's hard to break out the box and say you belong. You need to stay in this box right here. If your mission calls for hard questions and even harder responses, then it is what it is. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I don't know if you can see my little former campaign hat. When I was a drill sergeant, like
I
that's
see.
it's the tough questions. At the end of the day, you cannot. I like I've said on a couple of podcasts and things like that, the level of rhetoric that I have to endure, being as a Black woman in this side of the county, and the questions that I'm being asked and the level of standards that people want to hold me to, I'm built for that.
Right.
I am not shy to be able to answer anything, any tough question that comes. If I've got an answer, I'm gonna give you an answer. If I don't have an answer, I may go find out about that answer and I'm gonna get back to you, but I'm not gonna leave you hanging. Just come correct when you ask those questions. The way the Lord works for me, he orders my steps. So I know when things are being brought up against me to be a setup. So sometimes I might just leave you out there on your own, looking foolish. But if it's a real question, I'm going to provide a real answer. Sometimes it may not be what you want, but sometimes it's what you need to hear.
It's the answer is the answer. I hear you. And as a voter, I'm like, if I say, is that red or green? Let me know it's either red or green. I don't need to hear about the weather in Florida right now. Just give me my response. Let's be direct. I love the frankness. So let's see. I'm gonna get down to my closing question. We good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that the question?
No, no. Well, you know what? What are the three most important results you would want residents to see during your first term?
The three results that I plan to set up for within my first year,
Yep.
of my first term. Well, one is I got to make sure I get the full picture. I believe in making sure we actually have our audits, to making sure that our budgets are clear, to know what we have to work with. So it is understanding with the different departments, establishing those relationships to know what levels, and knowing how that I will be able to help. They'll be able to help get District 4 moving forward, right? This is
Right.
the vision. How can we make sure that this is happening based off of what the needs are for the community? So it's going to be real accountable plan. I need for people to understand that that's what there is a process being put in place. It's not going to be a snap because I can't work miracles, right? But I can start putting a platform together so that it can be measurable, that the community can actually see. That's one way, right?
Yep.
It is making sure from small businesses, I want to make sure that we have our own incubator system. I had used to have one in District 1. And so I want to make sure that in District 4, there are setup mechanisms so that if you've got a business that's out there that hasn't already relocated to Carroll County, that's in Douglas County, that you feel like you have the support in Douglas County.
Right.
I want to make sure that there is connectivity, not just from the county itself. I do believe firmly that we do need better connectivity from what happens in the city with the county, but also the school system. We don't have to compete with one another. We just need to have better communication to know how to work with one another. And so, like I said, in District 4, not only do you have the city of Douglasville that also falls within District 4, but you also have the city of Villa Rica. Now, I have to be very transparent. I know that's an uphill battle in the city of Villa Rica because I've been holding their feet to the fire with this eminent domain that was caused partially by one of the candidates that's in this race, because of his failure in leadership and the way that things got manipulated, has put several people in a position of displacement. Also, the removal of a lot of Black history, and so I don't operate in that spirit. I want to make sure that people feel protected. So as a real estate agent, home ownership, yes, is great. And I want to make sure that people have that opportunity, but I want to make sure that it's a realistic goal, that it can be stabilized, that they can stay in their homes, and that
Right.
we're not devaluing their homes because, oh, we need to add something else to the tax digest, so let's go put warehouses on top of it or data centers right next to it. I want to make sure that we're preserving our land because there's going to be a whole nother generation that comes behind us. And if we overbuild, what is going to be left for them? I want to make sure that we're planning properly to set their future up for success and not just for the moment.
Okay. Last question of the night.
Okay.
District 4 deserves a commissioner who? Complete that sentence. District 4 deserves a commissioner who?
Stands for the people, actually represents the people, no matter what age, no matter what color, no matter what religion, that actually represents you as someone who chose to reside in District 4, but most importantly, Douglas County. At the end of the day, I need your support to go to writeinamymccoy.com. You can review all of my platform, see what I stand for. You can hear the community speak on my behalf of what I've done for them. But if you want to join the team, help me with canvassing, help me on phone banking, help and be support of uplifting and sharing, liking all our posts. That's great. But it goes nowhere if all of it is just a like. Please share it. Please help move this campaign forward because this is grassroots. I don't have any party backing me, giving me talking points to make me sound relevant. This is the work that I've been doing for years. So again, go to writeinamymccoy.com if you want to chip in. Every dollar counts. Every dollar counts in helping get literature to be able to get voter turnout and education so that people understand that this process, what this process is and how it can actually win. This has never happened in the state of Georgia in terms of a winning election. And I want to change that because finally there is a viable candidate that's stepping forward, right? And if I didn't, neither one of my opponents, let me just say this last thing. Neither one of my opponents chose to even advertise that they were going to be running for reelection or even stepping forward. That just shows the level of privilege that they've been provided and the lack of respect that they have for the community to even talk about what their platform and what they're going to do. They only just showed up because finally someone who's educated enough to say, hey, I care for the community, that now they have to find the ways to find themselves relevant. You don't have to guess on where Amy McCoy is. Amy McCoy is always going to be here. Amy McCoy stands for the people. And so that's why I'm asking for your support. Please write in Amy McCoy.
All right. With that being said, Amy, thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time. Wish you the best of luck. I
Thank
will
you.
get this edited, get this out, get this ready, and share it everywhere that I possibly can so people can see for themselves who Amy McCoy is. Is that cool with you?
Absolutely. I appreciate the platform that you've provided me. And most importantly, just thank you for just giving me an opportunity.
You're more than welcome. And until next time, thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
And we out.